Teleological. Aquinas argued for design based on regularity and purpose in the universe. He observed the ordered nature of everything and concluded that the intelligence behind this order must come from a separate intelligent mind, which he identified as God. Aquinas supported his argument by pointing to examples of regularity, such as the Fibonacci sequence or the golden ratio. He also believed that nature worked towards an end or telos, and that objects in nature acted in accordance with their telos, which he attributed to God. Nature itself, however, is not intelligent, so therefore design cannot be seen within the object itself. Aquinas was influenced by Aristotle's four causes and believed that nature had a telos and followed natural laws. He used the concept of beneficial order to illustrate his point, arguing that it couldn't occur by chance due to its frequency. Aquinas claimed that nature itself was not intelligent enough to order itself, comparing it to an archer who directs an arrow to hit the bull's eye. Therefore, he concluded that an intelligent mind, God, must be responsible for the beneficial order in nature, guiding it towards its telos. However, there are weaknesses in Aquinas' argument. Firstly, it is seen as logically fallacious because he makes an inductive leap, assuming that the designer is God without sufficient reason. Additionally, his assumption about purpose in nature is questioned, as it may be a human construct rather than an inherent characteristic. The apparent purpose in nature could also be explained as evolutionary adaptations for survival and reproduction. The Epicurean hypothesis suggests that nature may have not always been ordered. Aquinas also assumes a perfect order and design in the world, disregarding natural disasters and aspects of nature that are harmful to human survival. On the other hand, Aquinas' argument has strengths. It reconciles faith and reason for theists by using reason to explain the natural world while faith helps understand the supernatural. The concept of symbiosis, which is observable through empirical evidence, supports his argument. Aquinas also appeals to human intuition regarding purpose in the world. Paley's teleological argument. Paley uses the analogy of a watch to argue that the complexity, order, and purpose evident in the universe suggest the existence of a designer. His main points are that the watch's intricacy implies design, even if we haven't witnessed its creation or fully understood its workings. Strengths. Complexity and design. Paley effectively highlights the intricacy of natural phenomena, such as the human eye and the regularity of solar systems, to argue for a designer. He presents compelling examples of order and purpose that seem to go beyond random chance. Abductive reasoning. It can be argued that Paley's argument relies on abductive reasoning, where the best explanation for the observed complexity and design in the universe is a designer. This approach is often employed in scientific hypotheses to infer the most reasonable explanation. Weaknesses. Counter-arguments from science. The law of entropy, which states that the universe tends towards disorder rather than order, challenges the idea of a designer of regularity. It suggests that natural processes tend to disperse energy and move towards randomness. Problem of evil. Hume's objection, voiced by John Stuart Mill, raises the issue of whether a designer can be held responsible for both the positive and negative aspects of creation. The existence of suffering, diseases, and natural disasters raises questions about the nature and intentions of the designer. Imposition of design. Immanuel Kant's skepticism questions whether the perceived design in the universe is an imposition of human perception rather than an inherent feature of the world itself. He suggests that design might be a product of our cognitive framework. Alternative explanations. Bertrand Russell and Charles Darwin offer alternative explanations to design. Russell argues for a universe without purpose or reason, while Darwin's theory of evolution posits that the complexity and diversity of life can be explained through natural selection rather than design. Psychological motivations. Sigmund Freud's perspective suggests that the desire for a designer may stem from psychological needs, such as a fear of death, rather than from objective evidence. Epicurean hypothesis. The possibility of chance and the interplay of countless particles over eternal time raises the question of whether the appearance of design could be the result of constant motion or trial and error rather than intentional design. Hume's criticisms. Hume raises several objections to the teleological argument, highlighting the limitations of analogies and the fallacy of inference. Strengths. Disanalogy and differences. Hume argues that the dissimilarity between the universe and objects used in analogies weakens the argument. He claims that the vast differences between a watch and the universe make the comparison logically fallacious. Fallacy of inference. Hume questions the inference of order from apparent chaos and suggests that order can emerge spontaneously from chaos without requiring a designer. Weaknesses. Lack of experience. Hume acknowledges that we have no direct experience of the universe, but this doesn't necessarily invalidate our ability to reason and make inferences based on available evidence. Purpose of analogy. Richard Swinburne counters Hume by asserting that analogies are not meant to be entirely identical but rather comparable in some respects. He argues that Hume misunderstands the purpose of analogies and their role in reasoning. Occam's razor. Swinburne suggests that Hume's rejection of inference goes against Occam's razor, which advises choosing the simplest explanation when faced with competing hypotheses. Cosmological. Aquinas' cosmological argument presents a logical and rational framework for considering the existence of God. By reflecting on the nature of causality and the existence of contingent beings, Aquinas argued that there must be a first cause, a necessary being that initiated the chain of causality and sustains the existence of the world. Aquinas' ex motor argument from motion is based on the idea that everything has the potential to be something but requires an external agent to transition from potentiality to actuality. Aquinas rejects infinite regress and argues that there must be an unmoved mover, which he identifies as God, to initiate the chain of motion. Strengths of this argument include its empirical verifiability and its validity as a theological apologetic rather than a proof of God's existence. However, weaknesses lie in the inductive leap made by assuming that the unmoved mover is God and the contention by critics like Bertrand Russell that the universe may simply exist as a brute fact without a first cause. Aquinas' ex causa efficient argument asserts that everything must have an efficient cause and rejects infinite regress again. He concludes that there must be a first uncaused causa, which he identifies as God, as contingent beings cannot cause their own existence and rely on prior causes. In the argument from contingency, Aquinas distinguishes between necessary beings, which have the quality of act and only God possesses, and contingent beings, which are finite and dependent on external causes. Aquinas argues that if everything were contingent, there would have been a time when nothing existed, contradicting Aristotle's principle that out of nothing, nothing comes. Therefore, Aquinas posits a necessary being, God, as the ultimate cause that brought everything into existence. Hume. The fallacy of composition, as pointed out by Hume, Hospes, and Russell, argues against the inference that because the universe is not a singular thing, it cannot have a singular cause like God. They contend that the universe is simply a term describing the collection of matter within it and does not necessitate a single cause. Stephen Evans argues against the fallacy of composition, stating that it is invalid to assume that all the individual parts of the universe have different explanations. He suggests that inference from small parts to the whole can sometimes be used to explain the overall picture. Scholars like Russell and Hume propose alternative explanations for the existence of the universe. Russell suggests that the universe exists as a brute fact, without a need for an ultimate cause or reason. Hume questions the need to speculate about a cause beyond the universe, highlighting the futility of seeking answers to questions beyond our empirical knowledge. Father Frederick Copleston rejects Russell's brute fact argument by asserting that Russell's refusal to even discuss the possibility of a cause undermines his rejection of a cause. Copleston likens it to refusing to sit down at a chessboard, preventing the possibility of winning or being checkmated. Critics challenge the empirical evidence for God as the first cause. Hume raises the issue of inconsistency in arguing for a cause of the universe while exempting God from needing a cause. He suggests that it is better to stop at the universe rather than endlessly trying to explain what caused God. Richard Taylor rejects Hume and Russell's argument using the analogy of a ball. If we were to find a ball randomly, we would naturally search for a reason or cause for its existence rather than accepting that it simply exists without a cause. Moreover, it is an inductive leap to assume that the first cause is the theological God. The concept of a necessary being, as rejected by Russell, is not self-contradictory since the statements God exists and God doesn't exist are both logically possible. In summary, critics of Aquinas' cosmological argument point out fallacies of composition, the lack of empirical evidence for God as the first cause, and the inductive leap made to identify the first cause with the theological God. These critiques challenge the coherence and evidentiary support of the cosmological argument.